All right, as of tomorrow, this country will have a new Prime Minister as Mark Carney gets sworn in as Canada's 24th Prime Minister. The ceremony, of course, will take place at Rideau Hall tomorrow after the formal resignation of Justin Trudeau. So the Trudeau era is over, folks. And I'm going to ask you about this when we open the phone lines. What are your thoughts on this? Is Carney the right man for the job? Is he the right guy to deal with Donald Trump? To me, that is the number one key issue. Right there is how can you handle the volatile, unpredictable Donald Trump over the next 4 years? To me, that is priority number one, job number one for whomever is the Prime Minister of this country. Is Mark Carney the right guy? Because the Liberals would suggest that he is and claim that he is because of his experience as an economist and his vast experience in the private sector and including being the governor of the Bank of Canada in England. That's on the surface, an impressive resume. Of course, the detractors, the deterrents, the opposers of Carney say that he is embedded in the World Economic Forum, a globalist. You've heard all this before, right? Carbon tax, Carney, sneaky, all of that. So this is this is what we're going to hear over the next couple of months. Is just attacks against each other, right? Poilievre is Trump North. And this is where we've landed. So I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts on all of this? Do you think that, have any of you been motivated to come back to the Liberal fold because Trudeau is gone and Mark Carney is in? Because according to some polling, it's neck and neck at this point. And of course, the Liberal or the Conservatives have enjoyed a massive 20-plus point lead for a very long time, and that's all changed now. So what are your thoughts on all of this? Has the departure of Trudeau motivated you back to the Liberal fold? Yes or no? And how ugly will this election cycle get? And why do you think attacking the opponent resonates more than promoting your own ideas and your own record? Because that's basically what the modus operandi is now politically, is attack your opponent and say nothing about what you're doing. And this is if you look at politics 10, 20, 30 years ago, politicians promoted themselves. Of course, they would offer some digs at their opponent. That was not uncommon, but it wasn't the only focus. That seems to be the way it is now. So some things that you can talk about, again, when we open the phone lines. Also, a new poll suggests that 40% of Canadians are worried about losing their jobs as many businesses scale back hiring plans in response to the trade war with the United States. Are you among those people concerned about losing your job or potentially your business? Because there are business owners out there who are not going to survive this. They just won't, because their margins have already been too thin, and this will put them over the edge, and that's sad. Also, have you decided not to travel to the United States? Are you among those people who have decided not to go to the U.S. as a result of what's going on? Are you willing and able to pay more to support buying Canadian? And if you're an American and you're listening right now, how has this impacted you, this anti-U.S. sentiment? Are you embarrassed by this? Are you ashamed by this? Or are you proud or indifferent to what Trump is doing in the United States? Because a lot of Americans live here in our area and are listening in our listening range, and I'm sure that you have feelings about all of this. We'll talk about all this with Steve Murphy as well, folks, who will join the show between 10:30 and 11. Look forward to chatting with Steve Murphy via phone. I'll get his take on all of these things and a lot more. So thanks for tuning in and listening. We appreciate it very much, and thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness as well on the other side of the glass. Now joining us for a chat is Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, Senior Director, Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University. Sylvain, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure, Todd.
All right, so as grocers increasingly highlight Canadian products amid a trade war with the U.S., Loblaw is rolling out new symbols alongside prices that include an indication that a producer's price has been affected by retaliatory tariffs. So I think that they'll do their best to not want to be blamed here and be in the crosshairs of price hikes and make it clear that it's not their fault. That's kind of what's going on here, is it?
Pretty much. I think they're trying to get ahead of this tariff situation personally. You've been talking since the beginning of your show, you've been talking about our political situation, which is really, I would say, vulnerable. We're seeing the changing of the guard in Ottawa. Different premiers are following different strategies. You had city mayors in Washington. Yeah. I mean, there's lots. I mean, so companies out there are just trying to get ahead of this, and they're either staying on the sideline, just waiting things out, waiting for President Trump to, do something, anything, and that's really hurting the economy right now. We heard that from the Bank of Canada yesterday for sure. Or you're seeing companies like Loblaw providing a PR spin to all of this. But I have a question for you, Todd.
Okay, sure.
If you see a T right next to a price at a Loblaw store, would you think it's about tariffs?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is that, Mark, is that effective way of, but how else do you do it though, I guess? How else would you let people know that it's impacted by a tariff?
Well, that's the thing. Well, first of all, my first question, I did ask Loblaw that question. I mean, will people trust you that really prices are going because, I mean, inflation is so complicated. How can you possibly isolate one factor? And by the way, inflation doesn't work just with just one factor. One factor is not going to push prices higher. Let's say you import, I don't know, tomatoes from California, okay? Yeah. And tariffs, counter tariffs from Ottawa apply to these tomatoes. So it's going to make those tomatoes more expensive for Canadians. But here's the thing with retail, Todd. If one tomato gets more expensive, other tomatoes will get more expensive too, even though they're not subject to a tariff, because consumers don't look at price points. They look at differentials between price points. So if one tomato goes up, the other one will go up, but the retailers will actually keep the same gap between different types of tomatoes. So my question to Loblaw was, are you going to put a T on other products that have been indirectly affected by tariffs?
Man, my brain's going into a cramp right now. I got to be honest with you.
The thing about
you just confused me, Sylvain. Not that takes much, but I'm a little. Okay. So you're saying that
I'll keep it very simple, Todd.
Okay.
If counter tariffs affect the price of one product,
right,
it will not only affect the price of one product, it will impact the price for an entire category.
Wow. So when you walk in, why do they just have a giant T hanging over each section of the...
Exactly.
Right.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's going to be a lot of ingredients. So Prime Minister designate Carney may decide to implement tariffs on ingredients affecting our manufacturers. Well, will manufacturers disclose to Loblaw what if ingredients became more expensive, and we'll see a T? The other thing, of course, that I'm asking is if there's a product made in Canada with American ingredients, will you put a T next to a made in Canada product?
Wow. Yeah. So
it may sound as simple T. People will say, "Oh my goodness, that product is more expensive because of tariffs," but this thing is complicated. Yeah. I mean, this is not just, and I've been on your show many times for many years now. I'm trying to explain to your audience that inflation is not just linear. It's not just a simple thing. It's really complicated out there.
All right. So people listening right now may say, well, here's this big grocery stores taking advantage of an opportunity again to raise prices. What's your response to that?
It's possible. What we'll be watching as usual are gross margins and same-store food sales. Those are the metrics to assess exactly whether or not there's gouging going on. I go back to the same metrics. Doesn't matter what goes on in the grocery store. If gross margins go up, and gross margins are revenues minus the cost of goods, if that goes up, it means there's gouging going on. And for Loblaw in the last 6-7 years, it's been stable except for a couple of quarters, and that's it. For others, for Sobeys and Metro, it's been stable. So that's the one thing we're going to be watching. But I do think that tariffs can open up the door to some profiteering. The GST holiday, by the way, may have opened the door to some profiteering as well.
Well, that's a sad commentary that in a time like this, in which the country elbows up and all this stuff that we're hearing in solidarity, that Canadian grocers would take advantage of this as an opportunity to gouge, especially with food. That is a pathetic, sad commentary, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I'm just sticking to data. The one thing that your audience needs to understand is that whenever Ottawa says, let's retaliate dollar for dollar, apply some counter tariffs, it will only hurt Canadians. It will actually make things more expensive. And I think that's why you're seeing companies like Loblaws getting ahead of this, preparing people to say, well, things are going to get more expensive no matter what. So that certainly that is true.
Wow, that's sad. It really is, and of course, it's all on the inflation that we've already experienced over the last couple of years. Pretty massive. At some point, people will hit a wall, and they just I suppose for a lot of people listening right now, they've already hit the wall, and they're not able to purchase good food, and we're seeing this hitting Canadians sadly, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, food inflation in January was at minus 0.6%. So we were doing great until, well, you know who came along.
No, that's true. But Sylvain, that said, though, we've already experienced all that inflation over the last couple of years. That's been realized, and although it's been not going up, inflation has been curbed. But we've still experienced all those gains that people's incomes have not kept up with. Am I right or wrong on that?
So it depends. So in 2003, you're right. Last year, actually, salaries went up faster than inflation, okay? But here's the thing. This year, we're not seeing the same scenario. We're seeing the same scenario as probably 2023. So your point is probably accurate for this year. Yeah. This is where it's going, and because we're only going to see inflation go up. The fact that the Bank of Canada dropped its benchmark rate yesterday was, in my view, a good decision because it is going to give a lot of people some relief, some financial relief, as we try to get through this tariff storm/war. That is actually going to make things more expensive no matter what. Tariffs, no matter where they are in the world, will make things more expensive.
Yeah, I would think that the idea that for some people to go into a grocery store and read labels and try and figure out what's American and what's Canadian and all that, there's some people that will do that no matter what. But I would think for a lot of people that would get old quick, and also paying more is for a local product is also going to get old fast because people's budgets are tight. What are your thoughts on those 2 points?
Well, so right now what we're seeing, so I've been to many grocery stores in the HRM, and let me tell you, I mean, you're seeing a complete de-Americanization of grocery stores. I mean, it's much harder to find American products, and if you do find an American product, it's on sale. They can't give this stuff away. I mean, clearly people are going into the grocery store and they're buying anything but American. But here's the thing. We're replacing American products with products from, well, South Africa, Peru, Mexico, Turkey. I saw some products from Turkey. And so those products will cost more to get here. As we get through this tariff war, I suspect that grocers will start to readjust prices. And do we need to talk about the carbon footprint of some of these products? I mean, they're coming from afar.
Exactly.
And so, but I do respect consumers' choice. That's what they want. That's what they're telling grocers, and they're adjusting. But make no mistake, all of these changes will come at a cost.
Yeah, I was going to say, at some point, like this tea that we're talking about will be over the whole store because everything will be impacted in some way indirectly.
Yeah, well, I'm very skeptical of the Loblaw's strategy, to be honest. I don't think it's going to work. What I think the strategy is all about, it's a product of some utter confusion out there, and nobody wants to be blamed for higher prices. And so companies are trying to protect themselves, and it's hard to blame them. So, but I don't think that Sobeys or Metro or the retailers will actually do the same as Loblaw. It's just Loblaw has been under fire a lot more than others because of the attacks and criticism around profiteering. That's probably why they're trying to get ahead of this.
Yeah, and I would think that there'd be a cost associated with it, human resources that you need to go through and put all these labels on, and that there's a cost associated with labeling these things, is there not?
Well, this is why in my discussion with Loblaw, you can tell that the T is not necessarily about just products that have been impacted by tariffs. It's more of a promotional stunt, because there are going to be some products out there that are made in Canada or prepared in Canada that won't have a T next to it, but would have been impacted by tariffs, because there would be American ingredients in those products.
Right.
So that's why this is more of a PR spin than anything else.
Wow. Okay. Sylvain, always great. Appreciate your time, pal. Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right, take care. Sylvain Charlebois, Senior Director, Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University. The gift card industry is booming. So is related fraud and organized crime. We'll discuss that when we come back. All right, this story on the CBC website, the gift card industry is booming and so is related fraud and organized crime. Joining us to discuss all of this is Joe Aversa, Associate Professor at Toronto Metropolitan University's Ted Rogers School of Retail Management. Joe, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
No problem.
All right, so the gift card industry in Canada is booming. It's expected to balloon to about $11 billion or nearly $14 billion by 2028, according to a recent report. But with that comes scammers, right? It's inevitable, isn't it, unfortunately?
It is. I mean, and I think it speaks to a much larger trend that's related to sort of retail theft and the fact that it's been increasing over the last little while here.
All right, so how does the scam work when it comes to gift cards here? I know there's probably more than one way, but what's the primary way here that's happening?
Yeah. So I think the thing that's has been reported of late is people tampering with cards at third party retailers. So you'd go into a Shoppers Drug Mart, let's say, and there's a rack with a bunch of gift cards. People are taking those cards. They're manipulating the barcodes, placing them back on the shelves, and then an unassuming customer that walks into the store, purchases the card, and then the money is basically pulled off from those cards and to the person that basically tampered with it. So it's important that customers when they're purchasing these cards that they take a good look at the cards to make sure they haven't been manipulated.
Okay, so take a good look at it. What should they be looking for?
Yeah, to see if the barcode is if the packaging's been ripped, if the barcode looks like something's abnormal, because they are physically changing the barcode. Mm-hmm. So for anything that would indicate that the card has been tampered with.
Why do they need to physically change the barcode if they get the barcode and they can just use it and then put it back? It's already been unloaded. The money's already been drained from that particular account, has it not?
No. So what happens is they manipulate the barcode. Once the card's purchased and money's put on, they then have access to the barcode on the card, which then gives them the ability to use the card before the customers.
Oh, I see. But it must be the time. It must be because you have to know when the card's going to be activated. Do you not?
Correct. Right. So I guess they likely are testing the cards on sort of these regular intervals to make sure or to see when they're actually loaded with funds. I see. Yeah, it just amazes me how people can put so much energy into scamming somebody. If they would just use that energy to better their own lives, life would be a lot simpler, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. Sure. It is, and again, this is it's not just with these gift cards. I mean, we're seeing it with all sorts of things. Before the holidays, you had people that were, breaking into, smash and grabbing out of jewelry stores, and then you have a bunch of retailers that are putting in all of these like protective measures to prevent it, right? And that's obviously affecting the customer experience within the actual stores. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's just one part of a much bigger problem.
And reading the story, from what I can gather in the CBC story here that I'm referencing, there are organized crime from China that is at play here?
Yeah, I can't speak to sort of the organized crime syndicate. Like if there's some organized crime sort of syndicate that's in particular like targeting gift cards. But organized crime has been linked to retail thefts, and I think it's, while you have individuals that engage in the activity, there's also there's money to be made, and people realize this, and so it's not surprising that you have more sophisticated kind of groups that are targeting the individuals in a variety of ways.
Is there any recourse for consumers who get duped by this?
It's a bit of a pain in the butt for them, because they have to basically find ways to get their money back, right? So it's been reported that people are sent, they're either sent to the retailer that for the card itself. So if they bought, like, for example, a Walmart card, they're told to go to Walmart, or they're told to go back to the company where the card was purchased. So it's a bit of a runaround. And also, when you're buying gift cards, they're usually being gifts, right, for individuals. And so there's probably a lot of this that's unreported, because it might be uncomfortable to reach out to somebody that purchased the card for you and to say that, hey, there's no money on this thing.
Yeah, and it kind of speaks to the era that we're in of a cashless society, right? Where people just don't carry cash anymore.
Yeah, definitely, and it makes sort of digital crimes like this a bit easier.
Yeah, I saw a story this morning on our website: over $100,000 in fake Canadian money from China seized by RCMP. So counterfeit money. I would think that as fewer and fewer people are carrying cash and have cash, then that would result in more people looking to scam through the currency, digital currency, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely.
All right, so I guess policing this long term, what role might law enforcement take in all of this? I would think it's going to be a challenge to ever find the perpetrators of this.
Yeah, it's not easy, right? Because again, is it a one-off, like one individual that's done this versus an organized crime unit that's responsible for these things? Obviously, finding these individuals is not an easy task, but law enforcement is working closely with retailers to help combat this problem. They do work closely with them, and again, it's not just from the gift card perspective, but there's been since the pandemic, there's been an increase in retail-related crimes. So. Yeah, they're working closely with them.
Very sad stuff. Okay, Joe, listen, I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care. Joe Aversa, Associate Professor at Toronto Metropolitan University's Ted Rogers School of Retail Management. And as mentioned, when you think about the amount of effort that a lot of people go through to steal and scam, if they could only divert those efforts into actually doing something productive with their lives, then imagine what they could do. But it's a matter of trust, right? Who can you trust? Who don't you trust anymore? We're living in a world where there's always somebody right around the corner ready to scam you, and online. And the real issue, in my opinion, is your personal information. That is the real currency, because we know that if personal information is compromised, social insurance numbers, birth certificate, license numbers, whatever it is, medical information. And we're highly vulnerable, and we've seen this before too many times. Then once your personal information is compromised, then that is the real currency that they're after. And that is, unfortunately, we're all vulnerable to that. All right, when we come back, a chat with Steve Murphy. We'll be back. All right, joining us for a chat is Steve Murphy, CTV special correspondent, analyst, commentator, former anchor. Steve Murphy, thank you for doing it. We always appreciate it.
Happy to do it, Todd. Good morning.
Excellent. So, my, oh my, where do we start? I think I'll start with the Prime Minister being sworn in tomorrow, Mark Carney, in the end of the Trudeau era. What a turnaround for the Liberals, though. I mean, this is quite startling. This is an amazing turnaround for the Liberals, in my opinion. What's your take on this?
Obviously, you're talking about the polling that suggests the Liberals are back in contention with with the Conservative Party of Canada. I was going to say the Progressive Conservatives, because all of this, Todd, to me is very reminiscent of 1984. Mm-hmm. The last time, by the way, a person without a seat in the House of Commons became Prime Minister of Canada. That was the Right Honourable John Turner. And he called a snap election because he, too, had led the Liberals to a rebound in the polls. But after the campaign was over, of course, the Liberals didn't win. In fact, they were booted to the opposition. Brian Mulroney got one of the largest parliamentary majorities in Canadian history. So yes, there has been a rebound in the polling. I suspect it's more because much of the antipathy toward the Liberal Party in the polling was really antipathy directed at the leader of the party, the Prime Minister of Canada. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's unfair to say that Mr. Trudeau was the brand, and when the brand was popular, as it was in 2015, then he was an asset. But when his personal brand became very unpopular, he, of course, became a liability. So much of the opposition to the Liberal Party was opposition to Mr. Trudeau. Now, whether this shift in public opinion manifests at the polling places yet remains to be seen. And there will have to be a very important federal election campaign that will ultimately determine that. But I wrote in a piece for CTV.ca last week that this really will come down to the question of who, and it really is going to be a two-person race between Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney, who represents the most reliable or comfortable change in a time of real existential crisis for Canada. And that is what the campaign is going to determine. So I think the campaign will be crucial, and I think that the polls, certainly are likely to move up or down. I wouldn't give you a nickel on the outcome of this election.
Yeah, we were chatting, Dan and I, this morning, and I said the same thing, just too close to call. For Pierre Poilievre, though, it's got to be a disappointment considering the lead that they had, and Justin Trudeau looked as though he would have been a weak candidate. So either way, it's good news for the Liberals, I suppose. What are your thoughts?
Well, Mr. Poilievre had the great advantage, of course, of not being Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, sure.
And again, when it comes down to that choice between Trudeau or Poilievre was the choice of a lot of people who simply didn't want Mr. Trudeau anymore. But, Mark Carney now has the advantage of not being Justin Trudeau. But the question is, and the test for Mr. Carney and the Liberal Party will be, is he personally able to distinguish himself clearly from Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Trudeau's policies? And that's why I think it will be very interesting tomorrow to see who is in his cabinet, how many holdovers from the Trudeau cabinet. It is going to be a much smaller cabinet, by the way. I'm hearing it could be as few as 18 people in the cabinet, or perhaps even a bit smaller, although fewer than 15 seems pretty unlikely, almost impossible. But it will be interesting to see who he puts in the cabinet to assert that he is different from Justin Trudeau. But this again is a test, and Mr. Carney is a completely untested politician. Mm-hmm. Let's stipulate that. Although again, I reiterate, he's not the first person to be elected or chosen Prime Minister of Canada without benefit of a seat. He was elected by his party, but he has no seat in Parliament. But he is not the first person to do that. So this is going to be a time of critical testing for Mark Carney.
Okay, how much of a fingerprint did Carney have on Trudeau and Liberal policies? Because it varies depending on the timeline and how long he was an advisor and how much influence he actually had over Trudeau. What's your instinct tell you? How involved was he in Liberal policy?
I used to work for a man, a good friend of mine, Dick Pratt, who would answer a question like that by saying, it depends whether you're buying or selling.
Yeah.
If you want Carney to have had tremendous influence on Trudeau economic policies, you can certainly make the case that he likely did have influence. If you're trying to put some distance between Mark Carney and the Trudeau economic policies, then you would simply say, well, he was never elected. He wasn't in the cabinet, although Mr. Trudeau wanted him in the cabinet.
Yeah.
It's clear now that the idea was Freeland out, Carney in. So I think that clearly there was a relationship there, a friendly relationship. But again, it does depend whether you want there to be a relationship or not, whether you're buying or selling the argument. But one thing is certain, Mark Carney cannot be totally distanced from Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government because he was an economic advisor. He did have the ear of the Prime Minister, and Mr. Trudeau was prepared to make him Minister of Finance.
Do you think that the blind trust rules, because some would suggest that they're not stringent enough, but he's agreed to putting his assets into a blind trust and to disclosing what he has? Do you think that's going to quell any concerns that Canadians might have that he's got conflicts here?
I'm not sure that it will. Those who want to be suspicious of his of his wealth and his business interests are likely to remain so. I do think it's a good thing that he has taken this action. I wish he had done it even earlier, although some would argue until he had the job, there was no need to do so. But as you know, Todd, I favor transparency in politics and process. And incidentally, I'm very, very surprised and disappointed that they've taken this long to swear him in. It was no secret that he was going to win this job. Surely he could have been sworn in Tuesday. Why are we waiting even 3 days during what I consider to be an existential crisis confronting the country when we need strong and decisive leadership, even if it is being delivered by someone who does not have a seat in Parliament? He is nonetheless the Prime Minister of Canada, and we don't need any more uncertainty in our dealings with the Trump regime.
Do you think his pedigree, which is impressive when you look at it on its surface, Governor of the Bank of Canada, England, and economist, and tons of experience, is that something that Trump would respect, or what are your thoughts on how? And you can't get inside of the head of Donald Trump. Nobody would want to, for God's sakes. But how do you think that might impact Trump and his relationship with Carney?
Well, we're about to find out. I think one thing is quite clear, and that is that President Trump didn't have any regard or respect for Mr. Trudeau. I think they were clearly not only adversarial, but they clearly don't like each other. Perhaps they even detest each other. I don't know. But I will say that Mr. Carney does have the sort of resume that Donald Trump might be impressed with. Although I think it's becoming more and more clear, Todd, with every day that passes, that Donald Trump is not impressed with anything except his own ability to create the kind of havoc and chaos and disruption that he is creating. That's his only interest, and that he's doing with wild abandon and tragically with great success. I mean, he's tearing down his own government, allowing an unelected person in Mr. Musk to essentially hollow out the United States government. Or Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, sitting on their hands, essentially allowing all of this to happen, I think because they fear the sort of chaos and uncertainty that Mr. Trump represents.
All right, framing Pierre Poilievre as Trump North, that's going to be the one of the attacks, and that is the attack on him, that he's just like Trump, and they don't make any secret, they don't apologize for doing that. Is that fair or accurate, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I guess I'll quote my friend Dick Pratt again. Are you buying or selling?
Yeah.
Clearly, the people who oppose Mr. Poilievre are going to paint him as a northern Trump, or a little bit Trumpian in his snarkiness and so on. I think that it would be fair to say that Mr. Poilievre, who has his own issues with popularity, by the way, in many of the polls, it's clearly revealed that Canadians haven't warmed up to Pierre Poilievre in large numbers. He has a great many supporters, I'm not saying otherwise, and the polls prove that as well. But there are a lot of people who consider him to be a not overly friendly, warm personality. There appears to be a bit of a gender gap at play. So, sure, if you're a critic, you're going to paint him as being a right-winger and of the Trump ilk. If you're his supporter, you're going to describe him as he describes himself, as a common-sense conservative who is speaking truth to power and saying things that have not been said in the country for a long time, et cetera, and so on. So it's all politics. And again, the campaign is going to be critical, Todd. In many elections, the outcome of an election is considered a foregone conclusion. Many people don't pay attention. It's going to be crucial that we pay attention this time. We really should pay attention every time, but it's going to be crucial this time because we are going to be selecting the people who are going to lead this country into a very uncertain future in what I described in a piece I posted a couple of weeks ago as the land of the giants, where with one squeeze of his fist, Donald Trump is able to bring us a great deal of pain and discomfort, particularly as he continues to threaten our sovereignty. In fact, to deny our sovereignty. It's not a threat. He just denies it.
Right. I want to get
about erasing the border.
Right. I want to get to that, but I first want to finish up with the Liberals. Do you think that the bench is not as deep as it could be? And Chrystia Freeland, might she be snubbed entirely with this cabinet?
Well, I mean, I think Mr. Carney will have to have given consideration to the idea he should try to bring everybody into the tent. The team of rivals in the model of Abraham Lincoln. And on the other hand, he needs to distinguish himself clearly from the last government. So how do you claim to be different if you bring back the deputy prime minister even in another role? Now, there may be a third way. There may be middle ground. Perhaps he will say, given her deep experience with the first round of the Trump administration and the negotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement Part 2, that perhaps Ms. Freeland ought to have some role short of ministerial. Perhaps she should be named as some sort of ambassador or given some special responsibility for dealing with the Americans. But I think that is also quite unlikely, quite frankly. I think that in the interest of distinguishing himself and being different, Mr. Carney may well opt to in your words, snub Ms. Freeland or leave her out of the cabinet.
Well, clearly she was trounced in this leadership, and I don't know that. I just think that she's probably at this point damaged goods, for lack of a better word.
Well, I think that's a fair statement. Clearly, she did not do very well in the leadership. Carney's win, I expected him to win with a huge mandate or a huge percentage. I didn't expect it to be as large as this. By the way, I think the Liberal Party does need to do some serious explaining about why so relatively few of the 400,000 eligible people were able to vote. This is not a good look for the Liberal Party. And again, I took a little bit of flack for some comments I made in social media earlier, explaining that if you don't like this democracy, that's okay, but this is the way it is allowed to work. The Liberal Party is allowed to choose a leader. The leader doesn't have to have a seat. A person without a seat can become prime minister. That's our party and our parliamentary system at work. Many people say, well, it's a bad system, and perhaps we should change it. But we're not going to change it now, and the Liberals can't be faulted for playing by the rules, although a great many people don't like the rules. But those are the rules. And I do think, however, the Liberal Party needs to explain how it is that fewer than half of the people eligible actually cast a ballot.
Well, knowing that you get flack makes me feel a little better about the flack that I take.
Well, but we take flack for the same reason. And here's the thing, and I've heard you say this, and you and I are in lockstep on this. Yeah. I don't mind when people disagree with me on the facts. Mm-hmm. You and I can have a totally different interpretation of the same set of facts. What I'm really not prepared to engage in is vulgarity and slander and name calling. This does not help the level of discourse whatsoever. And you and I can have a profound disagreement, Todd, and it should end without me resorting to calling you some name, some cheap shot. Mm-hmm. The level of public discourse is being so corroded by this that it's becoming almost impossible to have a conversation, particularly in certain social media platforms.
Indeed. Okay, I want to get to more, but we need a break. We'll be right back with Steve Murphy. All right, continuing our chat with Steve Murphy. Steve, listen, you referenced this earlier in the chat, and I want to get your take on it. When it comes to Donald Trump and the 51st state, and not only him, but his press secretary and others keep referencing this, I hear from some people who just suggest that this is just the art of the deal, and it's Trump being Trump, and he's not serious. I believe that he is serious. What's your take on his vision for North America?
Well, the first thing I would say is anyone who is familiar with Donald Trump's history of deal-making would not describe his behavior as art. He's not interested in deal-making. He's interested in domination. He's not interested in leading the world. He's interested in dominating the world. Mm-hmm. So that's the first point I would make. The second thing I would say is that, it's one thing to joke about Canada as the 51st state, to refer to our prime minister as the governor and so on. And in the beginning, it sounded to many like it was a joke. But there has been reporting by the New York Times in recent days that suggests in private conversations, Trump has actually suggested that the border between Canada and the United States, which was agreed to by treaty about 120 years ago, may need to be redrawn. So I think that Trump is much more serious about this than he was, or perhaps we're now realizing that he's been serious all along. But there's no doubt about this. We have things he wants. Mm-hmm. We have a landmass, we have critical minerals, we have energy supplies, and so on. You do not hear President Trump suggesting that he annex Mexico. But you do hear Trump suggesting, and I think seriously, that he would like to have Canada and what Canada offers. So I think the time has come, Todd, for a much more bold assertion of Canadian sovereignty. And although I will be the last person to suggest that it's not worth talking to the Americans, I think we have to ask ourselves at this point, what good is it to talk to Howard Lutnick? Because anything that he might say to Dominic LeBlanc today or Doug Ford in Washington can be undone with the simple, expression of a few words in the Oval Office by President Trump. So I think we need to more boldly assert our sovereignty. I would like to see that begin by a commitment to quickly double the amount we are spending on national defense. I would like to harden our border. I think it's very important that we reassert our commitment to NATO and to Western Europe. And I think it's also time for us to have a very serious discussion in the country about whether the United States is our friend. I've heard many of our leaders say friends don't treat friends this way. And that's true, they don't. And that really should tell all of us that this president is not our friend. I don't think he has any friends. I don't think he wants friendships. He wants subservience because he is a dominator. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that we can negotiate our way into some sweet deal with the Trump administration. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Do you think he actually lacks a fundamental understanding of how tariffs work? Clearly, it looks that way. But is that just ignorance, or is that just he knows better, but he doesn't want to say how it actually works because it doesn't spin well to the base? I don't. This is confusing to me.
Well, to quote a very, very smart man who said a few minutes ago, "I don't want to be in Trump's head." I'm never sure with Donald Trump whether it is that he doesn't know or he doesn't care.
Yeah.
But I also have concluded that it doesn't matter because what he says is what prompts the stock market to fall. It's what prompts, Canadian politicians to hop on planes and fly to Washington, et cetera, and so on. So does it really matter whether he believes in tariffs or just believes in causing all of the instability and chaos that his talk has engendered? It doesn't really matter. I think that, you've had very good speakers on this subject. I heard Ian Lee on with you the other day arguing against retaliatory tariffs, and I think his points are worth considering because immediate retaliation doesn't appear to have worked for us. Withholding the right to retaliate is, of course, something that we have the right to do. But the problem, Todd, is that it's not a fair fight. We are not eye to eye with America. America is much bigger and much more powerful than we are, and their ability to squeeze us is greater than our ability to squeeze back, except in the area of energy. And I think this is a point that has been perhaps overlooked. Canada's main export to America is energy. And Mr. Trump might believe that he can drill, baby, drill, and that he doesn't need our energy, but I believe that the evidence suggests otherwise, that Canadian energy, petroleum, electricity, these are important things to the United States, and particularly Western Canadian crude cannot easily be replaced. Electricity from Ontario, that may be another matter, but I think that oil, flowing as it does into specially designed refining facilities in the United States, I think that's pretty irreplaceable.
You think Doug Ford's serious when he says when he threatens to cut off the power? Do you think he'd actually do that? That's a pretty damn bold move, in my opinion, under any circumstances.
Well, he should have done it on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Is it a serious threat? I think Doug Ford is giving as good as he gets. But the problem is, at the first sign of response from Secretary Lutnick, Doug Ford, of course, paused his surcharge, and now he's gone, I understand, with Dominic LeBlanc to Washington today for more talks. And again, I'm not opposed to talking, but I don't see any evidence that the talking is working, Todd.
And the other thing as well is that all the issues, you look at our government here in Nova Scotia, I mean, all the time that they're spending on this, they're not spending on healthcare, they're not spending on homelessness, they're not spending on all these local domestic issues. They're spending on this, and that takes a toll.
It does. There's no doubt about that. This is eating up a lot of oxygen, but this is important enough that our national agenda needs to be dominated by this, and certainly until we get a new government. This is critical. This is an existential crisis for Canada. I am frankly, this is worse than my worst nightmare. I've always had concerns about what would happen if there was a less than benevolent president in the United States, because we've been wholly, overly dependent on the Americans for trade and protection for a very long time. And we have not fulfilled our duties and our obligations, and now we're paying the price. But having said that, we need to spend the next 7 weeks, having a very serious discussion about what Canada's future looks like, assuming that the Americans are never going to be the friends and allies that they once were.
Steve, always great. Appreciate it, my friend, and we'll do it again. Thanks, pal.
All right, Todd. Have a great day. Appreciate all the listeners and their comments as well.
Okay, take care, bud. Steve Murphy, of course, CTV special correspondent, analyst, commentator, and former anchor and friend of the show. Now it's time for you. What is on your mind today? Give us a call, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. An open hour when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, taking your calls. Way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Lots and lots to get into, folks. I won't spend too much time here because I want to get to the calls, but a new poll suggests that 40% of Canadians are worried about losing their jobs as many businesses scale back hiring plans in response to the trade war with the United States. Are you concerned about your economic future or losing your job or your business as a result of this and the impact to the economy in general? I think for a lot of you, the answer would be yes. I think that this could be far-reaching, and we have no idea how ugly this could get at this point. We hope for the best, but certainly can't expect that at this point. Have you decided not to travel to the United States? And are you willing and able to pay more to support buying Canadian? This is something that it's garnered a lot of attention lately and a lot of traction, but when all is said and done, are you able to sustainably buy more to shop Canadian and not buy things from the United States, including online Amazon shopping? If you are an American and you're listening to this, how are you impacted when it comes to all of this? Do you feel that this anti-U.S. sentiment is unfair? Are you being caught up in it? Are you potentially embarrassed by Trump or not? Or maybe you support his policies. What's your take on all of this? And, of course, Mark Carney will be sworn in as Canada's 24th Prime Minister tomorrow as the Justin Trudeau era ends officially. What are your thoughts on Carney? Is he the right man for the job? Is he the right guy to deal with Donald Trump? Has the departure of Justin Trudeau brought you back to the Liberal fold, or will it motivate you to potentially at least look at voting Liberal? And anything else you want to get into, the way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Tony's first up. Hello, Tony.
Good morning, Todd. I want to say one thing really quick.
Sure.
Your interview with Steve Murphy this morning was the best interview or anything you've had on in a month. That guy laid it out for you. Everything he said, you better listen to if you're a Canadian. He is absolutely right on his calls on the current situation. Canada has got to step up. I support Canada. I'm an American. I make no bones about it. I'm not going to BS anybody. No. I lived here for 25 years. The bottom line is, if you recall, and here I go again, I'm going to pat my own back. I've told you over and over and over again on this show, don't give him any leeway. Don't give him any room. Now he's got the room, and he's got everybody's attention in that room. This G7 is a joke. And whatever Rubio says doesn't mean crap. And whatever the Ludnick says doesn't mean crap. We saw that yesterday. This guy is really, really looking at some way to get to Canada's assets. I find it abhorrent. I'm not ashamed to be an American. I'm ashamed that the President of the United States is just a losing SOB. I can't even tell you how bad I feel about it. I told you I'm flying a black American flag in support of Canada, and I just don't understand why the Canadians are not taking this seriously. Forget about all this other crap that you got going on. You got to defend your border, and how you defend your border is up to you, because at some point, if he gets a wrong itch, I'm going to tell you, if he engages a National Guard, get ready. get ready because he's going to move to the border. That's my next prediction.
Wow.
Get ready.
Wow. You think you'd come to that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Come on, look at the guy. He doesn't care about anything. Look at what he did to Zelensky, a president of a country at war. Look at what he did to him. I don't agree with the Ukrainian war, but that's not any way you treat a dignitary from another country. What do you think? And here he has to just reach across the border. Come on, Todd, wake up, open your eyes. You're a smart man.
Yeah, well, I know, but it's just, Tony, it's just so hard for me to fathom. I'm 55 years old, and our relationship with the United States has been so good for so long, and I agree with you, and we've been laggards when it comes to spending in defense and the border and all of that. But to think that possible invasion militarily by the United States, it's just hard for me to compute that. And I think you could understand why, right?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, he's got a right-hand man. He doesn't even listen to him. Yeah. He slapped him down last week a couple of times. He does not listen to anybody. And he goes on instinct. Well, not instinct. He goes without thinking about what he's going at. Wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning and writes crap all over the internet. Yeah. And people buy it. Yeah. The Americans are not hard-pressed by anything right at the moment. They're hard-pressed because the guy that's in the Oval Office, and I'm going to lose my temper here in a minute, he is not a representative of the American people and the American public. He is not. He doesn't give a damn about one American. The only American he cares about is himself. And he panders to those people that suck up to him. He's a sect leader. That's what he is. Yeah. He's a cult leader.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. And I feel bad. I'm maintaining a very low profile. As you know, I haven't called in quite a while, and I won't call again for probably quite a while. But I thought Steve Murphy hit it on the head. Listen up, folks. And, you got an election coming. If you don't get out and vote, that's what you're going to end up with what you get. Yeah. And that's what happened in the U.S. They didn't get out and vote. The Democratic Party was hosed up, completely hosed up, and they didn't go vote, and 2 million votes decided in a country of 350 million people, decided who was going to be the president. You want the same thing here? You don't want to exercise your vote? Shame on you. And that's all I got for you.
Okay, Tony, thanks. Call again, pal.
You have a good day.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Jim, hi.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm well, you?
I'm not too bad. I'm looking for the Prime Minister's swearing in tomorrow. I thought it would be yesterday, but that's great. They had a few glitches in the process, I was told. But anyway, I'm glad to see him in tomorrow. So the Trudeau area officially ends tomorrow. And I just want to comment on, you asked if anybody got back into the Liberal Party because of this stuff that's going on. Yeah. I'm one of those. I never did vote for Justin right from the beginning. I was a Liberal then, federally anyway. And it's been, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever. But anyway, it drew me back into the foray to support the Liberals and Mr. Carney, or Prime Minister-elect Carney, tomorrow. Yeah. And I just want to touch on some of what Tony said. He's an American, and I appreciate that. But I don't need an American to get on the radio and tell me in particular and our fellow Canadians that we should get more upset. Believe me, Todd, we are upset. And I think anybody that's watching the news or anybody that's watching international news knows that Canada, excuse the language, is really pissed off. And every one of us in this city is pissed off. And so I don't need that to be told by an American or American dual citizenship that get your act together, get out and vote and do this. We got enough Canadians now that are going to do their thing when it comes to the vote. Now, what I'm concerned about is the election that's coming, just around the corner. I think my discussion with a lot of people is that they're more concerned with the Trump situation, but they also have to make a choice about who do they go with when it comes to our own situation in-house, which was for the last 2 years, we've been told by the Conservative Party about the unsafe streets and the military and what have you. So we're going to have to make a choice of who do we think is best prepared to move us forward economically and to take the challenge to President Trump. That's what I think, anyway.
Okay, so Jim, before the Mark Carney era, what were you going to do? Park your vote, or what were your intentions?
No, before the Mark Carney?
Yeah.
Well, that's been around. Like, if you were a liberal like myself, like ideology thinking, even though you weren't a so-called member of the party, we always knew that Carney was on the outskirts, and he was working with Trudeau there for the last, few years, probably 5
There's been about to that, though, Jim. There's been a lot of failed economic policies, have there not? Very unpopular economic policies. And so if Mark Carney's had the ear of Trudeau, and perhaps that the accusation that more of the same is applicable, yes or no?
In fairness, Todd, I mean, he may have had the ear with Trudeau, but nobody's coming out from any quarter and telling me exactly what he didn't do that was proper. For example, we hear lots of things about how Brexit and some of his successes internationally around the world financially were great. He's well thought of. Even Harper in a couple of videos praises him. So, I mean, there was probably some things there that he might have had some type of influence on, but he wasn't part of the government. Now he is going to be the government, and I think that we have to give that some time. But I haven't seen anything on the other side, too. I'm not in for name-calling. I don't like these commercials that they're doing with each other, but that's politics. But I haven't seen anything out of the Poilievre camp either over the years that has shown me that Poilievre is not a Reform Party prodigy, and also he's very, very steep to the right of that populist politics, which I don't agree with. So I think that the attacks on Carney aren't that really pronounced. And I think that Canadians, according to the polls, Canadians are leaning toward Carney in regards to, he might be the best equipped to at least bring us some civility to a negotiation. He's like myself. I was a negotiator on a small level, believe me, compared to Carney, when it comes to doing negotiations for hostages and what have you. And I can tell you that a negotiator always leaves the window open to negotiate. It may not look good publicly sometimes, like stand your ground, get in their face, but Carney has said that he will not sit down with Trump until Trump shows, the Americans show us the respect that we deserve as a country. And that steers my vote for Mr. Carney for even more.
Jim, you being a former police officer and a sergeant and all of that, a leader in law enforcement, you would think that, I shouldn't say you would think that, I find it that Poilievre's law and order kind of policies might resonate with you a little more than Trudeau's. No, yes or no?
Oh, a big no. And I mean a big no. Write it on your clipboard down there. No, because I'm a big fan of gun control. I mean, Rick Holland, I know that. God bless Rick.
Yep.
I mean, I'm dead against handguns being in the possession of people. I mean, there are conditions where if you're a member of a shooting club and what have you. But I don't like the Conservatives' take on gun control at all. So that's one issue. And I'm sure there are many police officers that would disagree with me as well. But that's my position and always has been. That's one of the things I don't like about the Conservatives. They want to reintroduce some firearms that I think should not be allowed. So stuff like that. No, I'm not a far-right person, a populist type individual. I'm right almost in the middle with a little bit of leaning to the old conservative right, Todd, like Mulroney and what have you.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Joe Clark.
Appreciate it, pal. Take care. All right, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Ken, then back to the phones. Ken says, I believe Jim's comments about Tony was rude and uncalled for. Tony, despite being an American, lives in HRM and is as much affected by Trump's actions against Canada as you or I. You should not dismiss any caller's opinions because of nationality, as Jim did, religion, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. It is wrong. Again, that's just Ken's opinion. So I thought I'd throw that out there. 902-405-6000. Dennis, hello.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
Oh, I'm doing good. So talking today there about some of the topic you've been discussing there, and people wondering, with Mr. Carney becoming our next Prime Minister tomorrow, is there a difference? There's been a change at the Liberal Federal Party. And I think what we need to look at is what has been in the news, right? And basically, but nobody's denying that fact, Mark Carney was an advisor, was a member of the PMO office for at least the last 5 years. That's what we've been told, right? He's keeping the same PMO office staff, as far as I know, what I've read in the news, to be his advisor. So he was an advisor to Trudeau with those other people, which is Mrs. Telford and Mr. Butt and whoever else is there. And he's keeping the same group of advisor with him, right? So what will change in his vision? So if he's working with them, and he worked with them for the past 5 years, obviously they share a common vision, philosophy, whatever, for what they see where Canada should go, what Canada should be. So why would there be a difference now because he's going to be Prime Minister?
Well, that's the Conservatives' one of their fundamental key arguments, and I think it's not based on, or I think it's based on some reality. What you're talking about, we don't know how involved Carney was when it comes to Trudeau and economic policy. Of course, now he's trying to distance himself from that, and maybe when he's at the helm. We don't know. Maybe Trudeau wasn't listening to Carney. We don't know that Trudeau was somebody who would. He kind of had a reputation of not really listening to people and going his own way. So maybe Mark Carney was advising him not to do certain things, and that'll be, of course, the Liberals' counter. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It could be, but there's another fact that it's out there because I just found out yesterday that links Mr. Carney with the PMO office, like Gerald Butt specifically, right? Gerald Butt, in case some people don't remember, was the one that tried to influence the Justice Minister, Mrs. Rabel, to change her mind. Not a good thing.
I don't think Gerald Butt is part of the PMO anymore, is he, though? I thought he was long gone.
But I think he's still an advisor. I'm pretty sure they mentioned his name when he was being briefed in Ottawa. But in any case, he's a member of the Eurasia Group, which is another one of those think tank advisor group in New York. He's one of their senior people. And yesterday I learned that Mrs. Carney, Diane Fox Carney, is also a member of the Eurasia Group in New York. So obviously they share a common philosophy. You know what I mean? You don't go work for a certain group of people unless you believe in what they try to achieve in the world, because that's what they do. They put the policy for the environment and finance, those types of things. So obviously, it's the way he sees the world, Mr. Carney. He has that vision, whatever that vision is, I don't know, but it's the same group of people. So I don't see how.
Well, you just said he has his own vision. Yet you said he's just mimicking what he's around. Does he have his own vision, or doesn't he?
I'm sure he has, but what I'm saying is that there's definitely some commonality with the other people that were there and that have been there for the past 10 years with Trudeau. I don't think he's that far away from their vision. You know what I mean? I'm sure they have to be some differences, but how much of a difference? Like some people say, it's a whole new sheet. No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be pretty much the same. That's my opinion.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate the call.
Okay.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's what it's about. It's about opinions. And we appreciate it. Robert, hello.
Hello, how you doing today?
I'm well, you?
Not too bad. You know, a lot of people may not know, but you know what Trump actually wants from Canada?
Well, I can speculate, but what's your thoughts?
Water.
Yeah, that's one of them for sure.
Water, because in the United States right now, there's 40 states that are in trouble with fresh water.
No, that's right. California, I mean, you go down the list, Las Vegas, that whole area is definitely need, and it's only going to get worse, obviously.
Yeah, it's going to get worse. Yeah. And Trump has already said there's a large tap in Canada which can be opened and flow water from Canada to the United States. He's already said that.
Yeah, he's talking with the West Coast in California. But that's been debunked from what I can gather, that river system does not flow down into California in the way that he suggested it does. But I don't know. Who knows?
You know, I've been to the Grand Canyon
me too.
twice.
Yeah.
And you see what rocks there right now that you've never seen before.
Yeah,
that's how low the water is.
Well, Hoover Dam tells the story, right? It's literally 100 feet or more down than when they built the dam.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, Trump is he's causing lots of problems for sure.
Okay, thanks, pal. Appreciate the call.
You're welcome.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Getting some emails from people who are not happy with what Jim had to say. Reference Tony. So, Tony, you're getting people defending you. I won't read any more of the emails, but people feel as though you took a cheap shot at Tony. So, anyway, just sharing the emails. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Maureen, hello.
Hi. I hear a lot about, Trump not wanting fentanyl coming into the States. But what about guns? We seem to be having more violent episodes in Canada than we ever had. And, what are they doing about controlling guns coming in from the States?
Yeah.
And maybe we should look at tariffs going on, the Americans for allowing this to happen.
Well, I don't know if we want to put tariffs on anybody other than what we're already doing with counter tariffs, but yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. When it comes to the border, you're absolutely correct. There's all kinds of illegal weapons crossing the border, and you're 100% correct. You make a good point.
Yeah, you never hear about that. What are they doing about it?
That's true. That's true. Thanks, Maureen. Yeah. Appreciate the call.
Okay, thanks.
All right, take it. 902-405-6000. Something that I'm still confused at, and it doesn't take much to confuse me. I get that. But why is it that we are in control as a Canadian border what goes into the United States? To me, it's pretty simple. The United States border controls what flows into their country, do they not? How did Canadian border officers and the Canadian government impact what is allowed into the United States? I've never been able to figure that one out. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. A quick email from Rob, then back to the phones. Rob says the assumption that if someone gives their boss advice, that advice is always taken could only be held by someone who has never had a boss or given them advice. What advice Carney gave and how much of it Trudeau adopted is unknowable to virtually all of us, so I would suggest that tying Carney to the policies of the previous Prime Minister in this way makes no sense. That comes from Rob. And, of course, others would disagree with that and suggest that Carney's fingerprints are all over the economic policies of Justin Trudeau, and some would say the failed economic policies. I guess when all is said and done, it's a judgment call that the electorate will have to make. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Hi, John.
How you doing there, Todd?
I'm well, you?
Good, buddy, good. You are bloody right about we're 8.5 times smaller than when it comes to population.
10 times smaller. It's 10 times smaller, I think.
10 times?
I think it's 10.
Yeah, well, it's close to that anyway.
Yeah.
But they want us to stop people from going into their country. They should be doing that, and we should be stopping people from coming the other way.
Exactly.
Why are we?
That's exactly right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to make a few points.
Okay.
I mentioned about the Arctic. They want the Arctic. They don't want the southern border. Like I said, that's what they're talking about. So he also has backed off when it comes to tariffs. Because Ford put that tariff on, he turned around and called them, got him to take it off, and they're going to talk about it. You push up against him a little bit, and he will back off, right? Now, there is a couple other things I want to quickly mention. Anyone that's in a law firm down there, he's trying to put a law through that they cannot go up against him or anyone that he agrees with. So that was written back in when Hitler was going on. They put that, I can't remember the guy below Hitler, he made it illegal for anyone to fight against the government. To the wall. Now, and then there's that young fellow that got put in jail. Well, that's right there is freedom of speech, and they have put him in jail, right? So we're like he is, boy, he's changing things down there, not for the good. Anyway.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. All right, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Hello, Jordan.
Hey, Todd. How's it going today?
Well, you?
Great, great. I would think we're getting a little crazy when saying that the Americans are going to invade us and take us over by force. Is that what I heard Tony say there?
Well, yeah, he suggested that was something that we should be considering. Those were his comments.
That's the next thing that's coming. The states are going to invade Canada with tanks and roll in and start just taking us all hostage because. Like, are we getting a little ridiculous with some of this?
Well, that's somebody's opinion. That was his opinion, Tony. Or sorry, Jordan.
It's a little far out there, don't you think? Like, no pushback, no nothing. You really believe that the Americans are going to invade us and take us over by force?
Well, would I have ever believed that they would do what they're doing when it comes to this economic war, and we'd have a president of the United States talking about wanting to eliminate us and threaten our sovereignty? No, I would not have ever thought that. So I guess based on that,
he wants to eliminate us. He floated something about a 51st state.
He didn't float it, Jordan. He didn't float it. He said it repeatedly, and including today, he continues to say it. That's not floating.
Happen, though. It's just to get people like yourself worked. It's not going to happen. We'd have to vote on that, or they're going to take us by force, and that's not going to happen. They're not going to come and take us by force.
Well, economic force. That was the term that he used. Economic force.
Okay. Now, my next thing is he said that his tariffs, he's going to take the money that he brings in from tariffs and give it to his people and give tax breaks. What are we doing with our tariffs that we're putting on them? Are they going to give us tax breaks here in Canada and give us more money, or are they just going to tax us more?
Well,
I'm just curious. I never heard anything from our.
I'm quite certain that they have said that they will use any. I'm sure that I think it's Premier Houston and others have said, and I don't know what Mark Carney said about this, but I'm quite certain that I've heard political leaders saying that they will use that revenue to help the economy and help people deal with the impact of the economy for sure. Yeah, I've heard that.
That'd be good. And then I just hear Tim Houston canceled an American contract there.
Yes.
Now my question is, why wouldn't he have gotten the Canadian company to do that in the first place? Why even go to America to outsource it there in the first place?
Well, maybe they have a level of expertise. I mean, you look at the shipbuilding here. Lockheed Martin has expertise that no Canadian company has. So perhaps.
So what do we have here in Canada? Do we have any expertise at anything? Or
sure, yeah, we have expertise.
Like all my tools are in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Guess where Milwaukee is? That's all American.
Yeah.
Every bit of tool I use here on the job site, me and everybody else, are Milwaukee or DeWalt. That's all American. Like, what do we have here?
Well, you're right. We've hollowed out our manufacturing capability, unfortunately, and this is why we're in this vulnerable position that we're in.
Okay. Well, like I said, I personally don't think they're going to invade us by force, and Carney will never get my vote. I can tell you that. So.
Okay. Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call. Hello, Paul.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well. You?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty good. Just want to clarify something your last caller yesterday said about having industrial greenhouses in Nova Scotia and so on, but she was opposed to fracking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the problem. Where she was citing, which was Holland, they have those industrial greenhouses as a result of natural gas and fracking. They have large power generators that also provide heat. They also provide CO2 that enhances the plant growth. And basically, that's how that industry works. And most of what Holland does under a greenhouse is high value, as in flowers. Nobody can eat flowers that I know of. Maybe some people do.
Yeah.
But this is the thing in Nova Scotia is that we seem to have like a blind ignorance. Like, for example, the man that said about, well, we have the biggest open pit gypsum mine in the world. We should be making all the wall board here.
Yeah.
Well, with the parent company, they have 17 plants that do that. 3 of them are in Canada. The rest of them are in the United States. And where they're located in Canada is where you have 6 million, 10 million people in BC, in Ontario, and Quebec. Irving has a wallboard plant that's brand new, state of the art. It's 300,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. Well, a competitor to this company that has the largest open pit mine, they just opened a wallboard plant that is 60% of the floor space of the West Edmonton Mall in Florida. That's Lafarge. So, these people that feel that we can just pop up industries and compete, well, all the wallboard going into your Kent Building Supplies is going to be provided by that Irving small wallboard plant in New Brunswick. People talking about nationalizing industries and so on, right? Well, we did that with Sydney Steel. And how did that work out? And it's the same with that professor in regards to the light rail transit. Mm-hmm. That cost $2 billion in Ottawa, and they've that's only for half of the system there. Yeah. It's going to cost another $4 billion. We just don't have the economics or the tax base to do this stuff.
Yeah, trying to ramp up manufacturing. And look, Donald Trump is guilty of this in the United States as well by suggesting that the automotive industry and the big 3 automakers should just pivot and build in the United States. It takes years, if not a decade or more, to make that transition for a lot of reasons. So Trump's guilty of this as well, right?
Well, I haven't mentioned Trump at all, but the thing. No,
but it's relevant, though. It's relevant, right?
It is relevant, but here's the entire point with Trump and the wage that he has for the entire world. They are the biggest consumer marketplace in the world, and they probably will always be. They are the biggest innovators in technology in the world, and what he's doing with the tariffs. I don't agree with doing this, but what he's doing with the tariffs is he's reshoring things like Apple are going to be manufacturing in the United States. That's $500 billion right there as far as investments. He is now calling for more shipbuilding to be occur in the United States. Well, two of the giant South Korean steel makers are going to be putting up mills. It'll be after he's gone, but they're seeing that they do not want to be shut off with that market with somebody that can just say 100% tariff or whatever, or we're not going to take your products. This is the thing. The largest semiconductor maker in the world is out of Taiwan. Mm-hmm. They're putting $1 trillion into the U.S. For manufacturing facilities. The attraction is there. And he's using the leverage of the American economy very skillfully. Whether we like it or not, that's what's going on, and it's sad to see, but it's
so. Paul, am I reading you correct that you're supporting what Donald Trump is doing with these tariffs? Is that the vibe that I'm getting from you?
No, I'm ambivalent as far as that goes, but also, boycotting American products. What was it? Paraphrasing Gandhi was an eye for an eye only makes the whole world blind, or it makes your next door neighbor's job a little bit more tenuous. It punishes the people that are your next door neighbors, basically, with higher prices and so on. Mm-hmm. I disagree with tariffs completely. But also the thing is that we have to, does he have a legitimate concern in regards to the tariffs on dairy and so on? Well, on the face of it, it does look at it. I know the details of that. Yeah. This is the thing. But people in Nova Scotia have to get realistic as far as things. Jim calling down Tony, I thought was ridiculous. The man's basically a Canadian citizen here, and leave him alone. Your guy Carney cited us that the United States was going to suffer because we're the biggest semiconductor exporter to the United States. That's not true. We're 15th in the world. Mm-hmm. We're below Morocco in that statistic. Morocco sends more semiconductors to the United States than Canada.
Okay, Paul. Okay, listen, I appreciate your call and your comments. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's see. Let's talk to Lewis. Hello, Lewis.
Good morning, sir. How's your day going?
Well, you?
Good, thanks. Good. Listen, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things with this trade war and all that's going on. There was a program on the news last night where we sell all this aluminum ore, whatever you call it, to the U.S. They refine it, turn it into aluminum, sell it back to us, and then various companies sell it back to the U.S. and they make beer cans and then sell it to us.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, isn't it? It really is.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah, it's insane.
Canada's been sitting around for the last 150 years thinking, we don't have to do much. We can buy it all from the States. We're stupid. We got to start doing that stuff ourselves. And there's more than just beer cans.
Yeah.
So many issues.
Yeah, well, the challenge, Lewis, is cost, right? Is that obviously it's because of the economy of scale, because of the United States and its population and its density, it's obviously more cost effective to do that. But you're absolutely right. On the surface, it sounds ludicrous that we would be exporting, importing, then importing all of the same product. It's really strange.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
It's got to come down. It's got to come down to at some point, Lewis. They manufacturers or importers or exporters or business owners saw the business model and saw that they could do it cheaper to do it that way, and that's what it was.
Yeah, that's true. But if you develop it here and give it some time to mature, then it does become cost effective within our country.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And this is a wake up call, Lewis, that we need to start rethinking how we do things and what our economy is based on and all that. We become too complacent and too dependent on the United States, clearly.
Yeah. Only one other issue I'd like to bring up.
Sure.
I'm totally against this idea of doing away with the tolls on the bridge that Premier Houston has done away with. I think that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. You and me as taxpayers are now going to pay to maintain that bridge and take care of it. It's going to be a huge expense to Canadian or Nova Scotia taxpayers. Who cares about $1 or $2 a day to go across the bridge?
Do you use the bridge, Lewis? Just curious. Do you use the bridge?
I might use it 6 or 7 times a year.
Yeah. So your opinion might change if you used it 6 or 7 times a week, and I don't say that flippantly. I just mean that I think for people, if it impacts them directly financially, they'll be all for it. For people like yourself, I can understand why you would feel that way. Really, I think it depends on your own personal experience and how often you use the bridge.
I think if you talk to some people who travel from Dartmouth to Halifax or vice versa every day, they don't begrudge the $5, $6, $7 they might pay.
Well, I don't know about begrudge, but listen, me as a Haligonian and somebody who doesn't rely on the bridges, but uses them 2 or 3 times a week, perhaps, and my household, my fiance would do the same. Look, I hear what you're saying, Lewis. I do, but I also look at it as like any piece of infrastructure that would be throughout the province that I might never use, and there's lots of infrastructure that I never use. But my tax is going to go into supporting them, right?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes time to replace the platforms on that McKay Bridge, taxpayers in Nova Scotia are going to have to pay for that.
No, I get it, but it's similar to like a fourplex ice pad in Dartmouth or wherever they are. I never step foot in these places and never will, never use them. But my money, a portion of my taxes goes into paying for it, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, they're going to tear down all those toll buildings, and I'm sure in 10 years' time they'll be rebuilding them, the same as they did with the rail lines. They tore up every rail line in Nova Scotia 50 years ago, and now what they'd like to do, they should put them all down again and run high-speed service between Windsor and Truro. They take an awful lot of cars off the road.
Well, again, who would pay for that? Taxpayers, right?
Yeah. But who reaped all the benefits of tearing up the rail lines 50 years ago?
Well,
wasn't you and I.
Asphalt companies who pave roads.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay, Louis, thanks for the call, bud.
Have a good day.
All right, take care, pal. 902-405-6000. Greg's giving us a call. Hello, Greg.
Hey, Todd, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
I want to talk about Trump, but before I do, just on the topic of the bridge, people forgetting she's coming to the end of her life. It's going to have to take billions to refurbish it or build it.
You're talking about the McKay Bridge, right?
Yeah,
that's true.
So I'm not sure. I agree with Buddy there about not a good idea to take the tolls off. Anyway, about Trump, if people really think that he doesn't really intend to try to force us into an economic collapse and take over our resources, I think they're a little naive. The other thing is, I think, just my theory, but I think the reason why Trump and Putin are so buddy-buddy is the Arctic and all the minerals and oil and gas up there. I really think that's what they're after, to split the profits, because I wouldn't put that past them for a second, right?
Yeah, so that's highly plausible for sure.
And I don't think Trump will invade, like Buddy said, with tanks and military, but he's trying to choke us out economically, so we're forced to join, right?
Then that's more or less the same, is it not? Like economic warfare is kind of it's not the same, but it's a version of warfare, is it not, Greg?
It is, but I don't think he'll cross the line and actually put tanks across the border like your caller was suggesting, right?
Yeah, well, okay. Something else you wanted to mention before I let you go?
Yeah, I just want to shout out or thumbs down to Mr. Kevin O'Leary. Okay. I don't know if you've seen him on CNN last night. But he's a disgrace as a Canadian. And the last thing, Todd, is let's haul Mr. Elon Musk's citizenship. I'll let it go.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Yeah, Kevin O'Leary is just absolutely embarrassing as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what his motivations are. I really don't, but he's a clown. I don't like to name call, but I will reserve, or rather I will withhold. Not withhold. I will, that him notwithstanding is what I'm trying to say. I think we could call Mr. Wonderful a clown. He calls himself Mr. Wonderful, so anybody who calls himself Mr. Wonderful, you got to be open to that. How anybody could call themselves Mr. Wonderful, I will never understand that one. But anyway, Kevin O'Leary, yes, I give him absolutely no credit or credence whatsoever. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. We'll open the phone lines again tomorrow between noon and 1. Incoming Prime Minister Mark Carney says he has put his assets in a blind trust. Is that good enough? We'll find out from Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat is Duff Conacher, founder of Democracy Watch. Duff, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
All right, so a couple of things I want to talk to you about, but first I want to get to the Mark Carney and his blind trust and the rules surrounding a blind trust and all that goes with it. Explain to some of us here who might not know exactly what a blind trust is, please.
Yes, well, there actually is no such thing as a blind trust, but it's called that because what happens is a politician or someone in another public office chooses a trustee and puts their assets, like investments, stocks, shares in companies, other assets, in control of that trustee. The reason it's not a blind trust is they know what they put in the trust, and they know they get to choose their own trustee, and they also get to give the trustee the initial instructions, which can be don't sell anything. So then they continue to know what they own because they knew what they put in the trust in the first place. And that's why blind trusts really don't exist. They're not blind, and they're a sham facade that hide and do not prevent financial conflicts of interest.
Who created these rules? Was it Parliament initially, or how were these rules created?
Yes, they were created back now almost 40 years ago when conflict of interest rules were first put in place for politicians, cabinet ministers, and the Prime Minister first at the federal level. And there was a Royal Commission of Inquiry into a conflict of interest by a cabinet minister at the time when Mulroney was Prime Minister, cabinet minister named Sinclair Stevens. And it was headed by a judge, Justice Parker, and he issued a report in 1987 and said that the rules should be that politicians and government officials have to sell their investments because blind trusts just cover up financial conflicts of interest. They just hide what the politician owns from the public. The politician still knows they own it, and then they can make decisions that will increase the value of their investments. And it's all secret and kept from the public, and it was really just a sham. He recommended that in 1987. Politicians have ignored it since across Canada because they want to be able to profit from their own decisions. And Pierre Poilievre has said if he becomes Prime Minister, he will require the Prime Minister, cabinet ministers, top officials to sell their investments that cause a conflict of interest. There's a bit of a problem with what he's recommended. It's a good first step. But the problem is the conflict of interest law at the federal level is a sham itself. It only applies to 1% of conflicts of interest. 99% of the time, the law does not apply. And so it wouldn't apply to 99% of the assets or investments that any politician would have. And so unless that loophole is closed, Pierre Poilievre's proposal to ban the Prime Minister and cabinet ministers and top government officials from having investments is really meaningless because they won't have to sell any investments because none of the investments under the law create conflicts of interest because the law does not apply to 99% of conflicts of interest. So it really should be called the Almost Impossible to Be in a Conflict of Interest Act, and many changes are needed to that act before we will actually have requirements to be ethical at the federal level for politicians and government officials.
All right. Do you think that that if in fact these laws were bolstered and given more teeth, that some people like Mark Carney might not even run for office because they wouldn't want to sell their assets, perhaps? What are your thoughts?
If you want to serve the public, then you should give up your financial conflicts of interest, which is the worst conflict of interest to have, because it creates an incentive for you to make a decision that you'll profit from instead of upholding the public interest. And so politicians, top government officials with the most decision-making power should be required to sell their investments. They can invest in bonds. They'll get a fairly good return while they're in office, and government bonds do not create that conflict of interest. And then when they leave office, they can reinvest in the stock market. But right now, you're allowed to have secret investments as a Prime Minister, cabinet minister, MP, senator, top government official. You're allowed to make decisions that make you a profit in secret without the public knowing. It's a complete sham. It's a sad joke. And it really should be called the Almost Impossible to Be in a Conflict of Interest Act, because it is almost impossible for the most powerful people in our federal government to be in a conflict of interest. And these same loopholes exist at the provincial and municipal level across the country and have to be closed, or we won't have ethical government. If someone says, oh, I got to keep my investments, I wouldn't ever run for office unless I keep my investment. Yeah. Well, they want to profit from being in public office. They don't want to serve the public interest. No one should ever vote for someone like that.
Well, perhaps they might just be a control freak and want to monitor their own investments, not necessarily pull the wool over Canadians' eyes and exercise in an unethical way to feather their own nest. Maybe I'm being too generous here. What are your thoughts?
Well, people should remember that politicians can help themselves if they have investments while they're in office by doing nothing. Let's say consumers or environmental groups or workers want a business regulated, and to protect them, to protect consumers, the environment, protect workers' rights. Well, if the government does nothing and doesn't regulate the business, then the business doesn't have that cost of regulation and will make more money. So it's really difficult to track whether someone is helping themselves, because they can help themselves by doing nothing, by not regulating when citizens want a business regulated. And that's why it's so important to just remove the appearance of a conflict by removing the investments. They can invest in bonds or guaranteed investment income certificates, things that just provide a basic rate of interest while they're in office. People should remember politicians are paid among the top 5%, for the very top politicians, the top 1% of salaries in the country. They're already making good money. And if they won't set aside their financial conflicts of interest while they're in office, then they clearly don't want to serve the public. They want to serve themselves, and they shouldn't be in office. So it's a very small sacrifice to ask them to just divest yourself, sell everything where you're invested in companies, and get rid of your financial conflicts of interest. The only one exception would be if it's a family business. Obviously, if you're part of a family and your family owns the business, you can't require the whole family to sell their business just because you've decided to run for politics. But in that case, you would have to step aside and not take part in any decisions that affect your family business directly or indirectly. And that's the way to solve that problem. But right now, as I said, we have a sad joke of an ethics law. It's almost impossible to be in a conflict of interest. And in secret, politicians can profit from their own decisions. It's really outrageous.
Okay, here's an email from Alan. He says, I don't buy this argument. How is any rich person ever able to get into politics? He says, if the politician sells their assets and it still ends up with a bunch of money, what are they supposed to do with it? Give it away? If not, what happens to the money? It goes into a bank, buy some bonds. Well, a bank account is an investment, so is a bond. What's the difference? What's your response to that?
A government bond, Canadian government bond, does not create a conflict of interest, because you can't further the interests of the government. If you further the interests of the government, you further the interests of the people, hopefully, because you're upholding the public interest. Yeah. And a guaranteed investment certificate, a GIC, as it's known, pays a set rate of interest for a certain number of years. So there's no conflict of interest in that as well. Mm. So, no, it's very easy to remove the conflict of interest by just removing the investments in private interests in private companies. And that's what they should all be required to do.
Okay, I want to shift gears and talk to you about the fundraising loophole that some are questioning concerning the Liberal leadership race and certain candidates. What are your concerns here?
Well, no one really thought about this, and a reporter from Canadian Press named Kyle Duggan noticed that some of the fundraising events for the Liberal leadership race were not being disclosed in the database that Elections Canada maintains. The Liberals made a bad move back in 2016, holding a bunch of fundraising events in private homes with the Prime Minister attending, Prime Minister Trudeau or other cabinet ministers. And the Globe and Mail found out about them and found there were lots of lobbyists at these events, lots of lobbyists holding the events, as well as people with ties to the Chinese government. And as a response to that scandal, the Trudeau Liberals put in place changes to the Canada elections law that required those fundraising events to be disclosed, which is great. However, what the law says is it only has to be disclosed if someone's required to donate or required to pay for a ticket to the event. And what happened was Chrystia Freeland, one of the Liberal leadership contestants, held events where she suggested that people donate a certain amount. And they weren't required to donate all that amount to attend the event. And that allows people to go to the event, make the donation, and no one knows that they're there at the event. The donation's eventually disclosed. But it's, when you're at an event like that, it's a chance to lobby a politician, and the public has a right to know who is organizing and holding and attending and donating at these kind of events, because those favors of organizing an event, holding it, donating, those create conflicts of interest for the politician. And the public has a right to know, and so that we can track those conflicts of interest. So there's a bit of a loophole in the law, and it should be that if you are fundraising, whether someone's required to donate to attend an event or not, if you're raising money, who organized the event, who's holding it, and who's attending should be disclosed, because again, those favors create conflicts of interest for the politician, and we need to be able to track those.
Duff, always great. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time. Thanks for all that you do.
Thank you very much for your interest. Take care.
All right, take care. Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch. Poll shows 8 in 10 Canadians oppose MP pay raise. We'll discuss this when we come back. $299,900. What does that mean to you, Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director? What's that number ring a bell for you? What's that tell you?
Well, that's the current minister's salary right now. Hey, Todd. Wow. So, I mean, yeah, ton of money, right? Yeah. And folks, like April 1, like every year, the joke is on taxpayers, members of Parliament. All members of Parliament are going to be taking another raise in just a couple weeks. So that big paycheck is going up for our politicians in Ottawa.
Wow. What's the raise based on? What's the formula that they use?
Yeah, so every single year they get a raise, and it's based on union contracts in some of the largest companies in Canada, right? So this year's raise will range from anywhere between an extra $6,700 all the way up to an extra $13,400. So, Todd, after April 1's raise, your backbench member of Parliament will be making about $210,000, about 3 times more than the average worker. A minister's salary will be $310,000, and the Prime Minister's salary will jump up to about $420,000, which is about 6 times more than the average Canadian worker. And Todd, I just got to point this out, right? This will be their 6th pay raise since the beginning of 2020.
Well, and then you factor in all the cost of governance when you look at their staff, the travel, the pensions, and all of that. Just an astronomical amount of money to be governed here. It's ridiculous.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge, right? And let me just point out a couple things, right? To your point, you got pensions, there's a severance, there's a transition allowance. When they fly abroad, right? Fancy hotels, fancy fees, all paid for by the taxpayer. But let me just go back to this point that this is their 6th pay raise since the beginning of 2020. Every year they've been taking a raise while their constituents struggled through a pandemic. You had the lockdowns. You had the cost of living crisis. During those tough years, many people lost their jobs. Businesses were shut down. And now we're in the midst of a tariff war that will bring so much pain for regular Canadians. And all throughout this time, members of Parliament have continued to help themselves, continue to take more money from taxpayers to increase their own pay.
All right, so the one of the arguments that we hear fundamentally is that if you need good people and you need to attract good people, which we do, you have to incentivize it, and many people leave private sector jobs and take a risk, and you might not get reelected, and all of that. You've heard all this before. Yeah. I'm just regurgitating it, but what's your response to that?
Well, my response to that is they're already highly paid, right? And the salary alone, Todd, is anywhere from 3 to 6 times more than what the average Canadian worker makes. They've been getting raises essentially every single year going back a decade, right? So they are already very well compensated, and that's just the salary. Then you got the pensions for a lifetime, and all they have to do is serve 6 years in office. They don't get the pension. They get a $100,000 severance check on their way out. So they are already highly compensated. But to go directly to the issue that you raised, you know what? It's called the House of Commons for a reason. In our democracy, they are supposed to be there to represent the average person. And I actually think when you have our elected representatives becoming financially divorced from the realities facing their constituents, you end up with some of the crazy policies that you've seen over the last handful of years, because the people who are supposed to represent us in Ottawa, they don't understand how their policies, the taxes, the regulations are impacting ordinary folks back in their constituencies.
And you get guys like Charlie Angus, who is on his way out, some would say finally, but anyway, Charlie Angus has been around forever. God knows how much money. We're talking millions and millions of dollars that this guy cost taxpayers to have him sit in that seat.
Well, you know what, too? Let me go back to the democracy angle here, right? Because how a democracy is supposed to work is that Canadians are supposed to be the boss, right? Like, that's how it's supposed to work. And, like, I don't know about you, but I don't get a raise if my boss doesn't think I deserve one. Mm-hmm. And Canadians overwhelmingly don't think that our politicians in Ottawa deserve a raise. And you mentioned the poll. Well, we had Leger, a reputable polling firm, do a poll across Canada, and it showed that 79% of Canadians oppose the MP pay raise. 79%. A large majority in every demographic, gender, age, province, what type of city or town you live in. A vast majority of Canadians oppose the MP pay raise. So members of parliament are supposed to listen to their boss, the Canadian, the taxpayer, and it looks like they're not listening right now. And let me just say one more thing. Mm-hmm. It's all of the members of parliament, right? I haven't heard a single member of parliament from a single party actually stick up for their constituents, their boss, and say no to this pay raise.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable, and it's hard to measure. It's hard to measure what return on investment when it comes to this. But I think that taxpayers should look at governance as a return on investment, because we're paying for this, and it's a hefty price. And I don't know how do we measure, or what type of measurements can we perhaps employ to analyze this, to see what type of return we're getting for this huge investment?
Well, it is tough because there's also knock-on effects, right? And here's what I mean by that. So, look, I've talked about a lot of symbolism, the cost to taxpayers, but the cost to taxpayers when a member of parliament or a minister or the prime minister gives themselves a raise is actually much more bigger, because when MPs take raises every year, the bureaucracy also points to the members of parliament and demands raises themselves, big, massive raises. So it was about 2 years ago when the largest federal government union hit the streets and went on strike in Ottawa. And we got our hands at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation on the list of union demands. And right in the demands from the union bosses, they pointed to the annual salary increases for members of parliament as a reason why the bureaucracy should take more money from taxpayers. And at the end of the day, it is the bureaucracy, right? The 108,000 extra government bureaucrats. The fact that the cost of the bureaucracy has gone up by 73% in less than a decade. It's those costs that must be reined in. And I'm telling you, politicians are going to have a hard time finding the moral authority to rein in the size and cost of the bureaucracy when they're stuffing their pockets with higher pay every year.
Wow. Okay, Franco, thanks for doing this. Appreciate your time. Thanks for what you do.
Hey, sorry for being the rain cloud today, Todd, but thanks for having me on.
All right, no sweat. Take care. Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director. We'll talk about tariffs and all of what's going on with this trade war with Moshe Lander when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, we will be later in this half hour giving away Moosehead tickets will be hosting Cape Breton on Sunday. So listen for your cue to call, folks. Later in this half hour, we will give away Moosehead tickets. All right, joining me now is Moshe Lander, economist with Montreal's Concordia University and a regular contributor to the show. Moshe, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, of course.
More regular these days than usual, right?
I know, That's true. But we need your expertise to help try and keep up with this stuff. It's just wild, right? I don't even know where to start. So I'll throw it over to you. What's percolating to the top of your brain when it comes to the tariff war today?
Well, thank goodness there's no news. I think this is exactly what the meaning of no news is good news is. That there were no late night tweets or no 3 p.m. news conference announcements of some changes that are coming. So I think it's just kind of everything is in this state of an unstable equilibrium right now.
All right, what are your thoughts on Doug Ford and is he's kind of Captain Canada right now, or how would you describe Doug Ford through all of this?
Yeah, he's kind of the one that's right in front of the mics the most, and he's on American TV all the time. He made a real misstep, though, earlier this week with that electricity tax idea. That was a buffoonish economics move. Don't poke the bear, for goodness sakes. Beyond the fact that an export tax is even worse than an import tariff from an economic efficiency standpoint. I don't know what he was thinking he was doing there, especially after he just won a honkingly large majority. He can stay quiet for the next 5 years. He doesn't have to worry about his voters coming after him. It really was a questionable move.
Well, I guess some say that you have to hit hard or we have to hit back or whatever. Do you subscribe to that theory or no?
Look, I get from the politics standpoint that you do need to appear to be doing something, even though from an economic standpoint, the best thing to do is nothing. And it's not because nothing is appeasing them or it's just from an economic efficiency standpoint. If you compound tariffs with your own tariffs, this is not they cancel each other out. This is not that it rebalances things or two wrongs make a right. This is two wrongs make an even bigger wrongs. But you know, if you remember when Ford took that swing, all of the tariffs had essentially been removed and we were back to square one. So there was still the threat the tariffs were coming in April. There was still the threat of steel and aluminum tariffs coming into play. But I'm a huge believer that if you're going to do this for political reasons, you wait for them to move first and then you counter. That keeps the public on your side, that we are the victims here. We're not the ones that are provoking the situation. He went out and provoked them, and that's even from a political standpoint what I think was wrong.
Right. What are your thoughts on Mark Carney and what he might bring to the table? Obviously, we know his pedigree is as an economist, and it's a nice pedigree, that's for sure. But do you think that'll translate into something tangible when it comes to dealing with Trump? Do you think Trump will respect that, or we know that he and Trudeau did not have a good relationship? But what are your thoughts on Carney?
Yeah, I don't think they could have a worse relationship with Trump than Trudeau did. That's not necessarily Trudeau's fault. That's just Trump doesn't seem to like that sort of personality type. He's going to attack Carney. He's going to attack anybody. And so Carney's going to be no different. I'm kind of worried, though, why Carney would want the leadership. I understand wanting to be prime minister. But you and I, when we often talk sports, the sporting analogy is you never want to be the guy that follows the guy. You want to be the guy that follows the guy that follows the guy. I would have thought that let Chrystia Freeland win this round, let her lead the Liberals into the election, let them lose the election, which is likely what's going to happen even with Carney in charge. And then 2-3 years down the line, you can position yourself to be the one that's going to lead them into the next election where they might have a reasonable chance of winning. I think that he's a great central banker. He was respected at the head of the Bank of Canada. He left that job to become a respected head of the Bank of England, which is probably a promotion, relatively speaking. But those jobs don't involve politics, at least not openly. And you don't have to worry about trying to win over an electorate by convincing them that the economics are correct and that the people's beliefs are wrong. He now has to play politics, and I often find, having dealt with politicians in a former career working in the civil service, politicians don't have a problem understanding the economics. They have a problem when they say it doesn't translate to votes. And so Carney's going to have to sacrifice some of his economics in exchange for politics, and that just worries me that he's going to become like the rest of them.
When it comes to tariffs and a basic fundamental understanding of tariffs, it appears as though on the surface that Donald Trump does not understand how a tariff works, but I find it hard to believe that he couldn't. But what are your thoughts on his unwillingness to actually describe what a tariff is and how it works, and including his own press secretary? She did the same thing yesterday. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think that they're interested in trading in truth. I think, I think that's why the platform is called Truth. So, you get rid of the hard stuff up front. I think what they're interested in is just tapping into people's anger. And so when you say a tariff, this is going to correct unfair treatment. This is going to correct the huge subsidies that we give Canada. Like, all of those are factually incorrect. So privately, whether he absorbs it or not, we've seen before, too, that even when he starts speaking, the first thing that comes out of his mouth is sometimes false. The second thing that comes out of his mouth is an exaggeration of the falsehood that he originally stated. And by the time you get to the 10th, 20th campaign speech, it's so far disconnected from the original comment that even he made, which was an untruth. You're in a different realm altogether. So, look, I think that permeates then through the administration, that they're not interested in trying to convey to the American public what a tariff is, why we need it. They're merely interested in just saying, we have these grievances. This is how we make America great again. We go settle scores, even if it damages the economy. And you even heard him say on Fox, I think last weekend, we're probably going to have a recession, but that's okay. We'll get through it. Well, his entire campaign was that America will be a strong, great economy again. And now he's backtracking because he realizes his policies are flawed, but he needs a way to show that this is a win even when it's a loss.
Right, ramping up manufacturing and scaling up manufacturing, whether it be the auto sector or whatever it is that Trump suggests that will be the case or the result of these tariffs. I would think that would take years and years to fully ramp that and scale that up. And I don't know that the American public has the appetite to endure that type of misery. What are your thoughts?
You're exactly right. In his mind, somehow it's like a video game where you just like plant a factory on the ground and it's up and running. Beyond the fact that it takes years to get those factories built, you also have to fill those factories with people. And when he's taking a stance that he's trying to push immigrants out of the country, then where are you going to find these people? The existing labor force is strong in the U.S. The unemployment rate is relatively low. So he's going to have to poach them from other industries. But he forgets that the reason why economic development happened in the U.S. over the last 4 decades was that they moved from jobs that they were no longer efficient at doing to jobs where they were efficient. And so to go back to the 1980s style of what America looked like is essentially taking them back also in terms of their standard of living. So it's not just that it's a years-long exercise to get those factories online. It's reverting America back. And so when he's talking about making America great again, really to me, the entire philosophy is that it's a nostalgia play and that people are scared of their current lives or what the future looks like or what's coming. So, hey, remember when things were better? But the thing with nostalgia is it's often not quite the way we remember it, or we tend to remember only the positive things and not the bad things. Again, I don't think that he's really worried about the economics of building factories and bringing back manufacturing jobs.
Okay, and now we've got an issue with China and their seafood exports, 25%, and that could be detrimental, very impactful. What are your thoughts on that? And the argument that while you're tariffing our cars at 100%, that's legit as far as I'm concerned. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly it. This is the danger of what the Americans have started, is that for 50 years, 70 years, they were essentially the world leader in trying to push countries towards more liberalized trade, removing barriers, increasing economic interdependence. When they now say, well, we're scrapping all of that, it encourages every other country to say, well, if they're not committed to it, why do we have to be committed to it? And so China's been licking their lips at the idea of, all right, now that the Americans are off board, we can go start attacking as well. And they're ramping up. And again, we're falling for the same bait. Just we're justifying it on different grounds. With the Americans, it's hurt feelings. With China, somehow it's a political system or an ideology that we find offensive. And so therefore we feel justified in doing the same thing that we want to do with the Americans or the Americans want to do with us. I think when we start exchanging that, you're going to see very quickly in Atlantic Canada, they're going to bear the brunt of a lot of these policies in the way that Ontario and Quebec are bearing the brunt of the steel and aluminum attacks from the U.S.
All right. So what's your instincts when it comes to the coming weeks and months here, or is it too unpredictable to know where this is going to go?
You know, I have no clue, Todd. Oh. I was on French television yesterday. About 2 minutes before we went to air, you know, the producer comes and says, like, you know, we're coming to you in a couple of minutes, and they just drop like, oh, by the way, the counter tariffs have been put in place. Talk to you in a minute. Like it's like that fluid that even when I'm coming on to talk about a topic, by the time that we go from waiting to on air, things change. If you tell me what's going to happen on April 2, which is the next major deadline, I have no clue, because it seems that they almost trade in uncertainty, and that actually can sometimes be the damaging part of the exercise. Is how can I make a decision about my business over the next 3 weeks if I don't know what's coming in the next 3 weeks, or whether they're going to give another reprieve? And now I spend time worrying about trying to find new suppliers or new supply chains, and that type of thing then can actually be costly to the business, even if the actual threat never materializes. So I have a feeling it's just going to be more chaos, more confusion. This was what the first Trump term looked like. It was just there were a bunch of mainstream Republicans around him to cover up his mistakes. There's nobody there to do it now. And in fact, the people around him are magnifying them. So look, anything could happen in the next 3 weeks.
Moshe, appreciate it. Your time. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
All right, take care. Moshe Lander, economist with Montreal's Concordia University. When we come back, Square Roots, founded by St. Mary's University students in 2016, buys imperfect yet perfectly edible food from local farmers, sells it directly to customers at a price that is 50% less than the grocery store. We'll talk about all of this when we come back. All right, before I chat with my next guest, we're going to give away 2 sets of tickets to see the Mooseheads host Halifax, or rather Cape Breton, on Sunday. Mooseheads host Halifax. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hosting Cape Breton on Sunday at 3 o'clock. If you'd like a pair of tickets, be callers 5 and 6 now at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to win these tickets. Again, 902-405-6000. Callers 5 and 6 will win the tickets, and good luck. All right, Square Roots, founded by St. Mary's University students in 2016. What's this all about? Joining me to talk about it is Courtney Dingle, Square Roots president and business student at St. Mary's University. Courtney, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so what is Square Roots all about?
So we take produce that doesn't necessarily meet cosmetic standards for grocery stores, so things that are too big, too small, a little ugly, a little misshapen, and we distribute them to community locations across Nova Scotia so we can connect this produce with families that need affordable, healthy, and fresh produce.
Wow, it's pretty cool, eh? I mean, this must be, for a lot of reasons, this makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really amazing way to address 2 completely different problems, kind of under the same umbrella of food insecurity and food waste. Nova Scotia has the highest rates of both in Canada, so it's really great to be able to address both issues. Okay,
so how do you promote it?
So in terms of promotion, we have a website, Facebook pages, and Instagram pages. We do a lot of social media outreach that way. And it's been really great at getting community members in the doors, seeing what all of our programs are about, and seeing how we can impact people.
Okay, so how do people buy what's the process here? How do people actually purchase the goods?
Yeah, so they're able to go to squarerootsnew.ca and see if there's a location near them, find the kind of associated page for that, and every twice a month, we have these produce sales that sell this produce for $10 for 10 pounds or $1 a pound, really just helping get the produce into their homes affordably.
Where are the sales? What are the locations?
So we operate from 16 locations across Nova Scotia. Some of our more popular ones are in Sackville, Fairview, Dartmouth. They're really all across the province. They run at community centers, libraries, and different kind of public spaces like that, just to get as many people in the door again.
I would think at a time in which food insecurity is high and food prices are sky high, that the interest must be growing here, I would dare say.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the past couple of years, but especially the last year, we've had the amazing opportunity to work with the government of Nova Scotia actually to expand the program pretty significantly. In the last year, we've done about 210,000 pounds of produce into the homes of Nova Scotians, which we're really fortunate to be able to do. We're really excited to be able to do. And it only keeps going from here, which we're really excited about.
That must feel good, eh? I would say on just to know that first of all, the saving of the food and not having the food go to the landfill, also helping people financially. It's just a huge win-win for everybody.
It really is, and it's also a win for our students. We're all business students at the St. Mary's University Sobey School of Business, so we all get to see kind of how our skills that we're learning in the classrooms can translate into the real world, and we get to do it through doing a lot of good in our communities, which is, always a bonus.
Yeah, indeed. So again, for people who want to know more about it, they direct them online as to where they can get all the details.
That'd be at squarerootsnew.ca, squareroots and smu.ca. All of the information's there and can help direct them to getting this fresh, affordable, and healthy produce into their homes at really, really discounted price. It's about half what it costs at the grocery store.
Awesome stuff, Courtney. Great. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care. Courtney Dingle with St. Mary's University. And it's just a fantastic concept and idea, and we should be doing more of that type of thing, in my humble opinion. Lots of emails today, as per usual, and I'll take the time to go through a couple of them anyway. This one from John on border security says the fentanyl border emergency crisis is being used as a means for Trump to bypass Congress to establish tariffs as part of their economic nationalism agenda. Says if you have a chance, listen to Gavin Newsom's California's Democratic governor with Steve Bannon. Bannon almost admitted the fentanyl emergency as a false flag. The United States has offices and the U.S. Coast Guard. It's ridiculous to believe they are not capable of protecting their own border security. After September 11th, we had officers embedded in Canadian Border Services offices. Most of this is gone now at the discretion of the U.S. government, which signals the need isn't there anymore. That comes from John. And again, to me, it's pretty fundamental, folks. It's pretty basic. Again, you've got a border with the United States, and things flowing into the United States from Canada have to go through U.S. checkpoints. Do they not? I'm pretty sure they do. And if things flowing from the U.S. into Canada has to go through Canadian checkpoints. So why is it Canada's responsibility for what flows into the United States? I don't understand that. I've never been able to figure it out, and I tend to agree with what the email said, that this is a fault. Now, is fentanyl a problem? Sure, of course. Fentanyl's a problem here in this country as well. It's deadly. It's horrible. But that said, is it our responsibility as a nation to monitor and restrict what goes into the United States? And I don't think that it is. Perhaps I'm wrong. Okay, let's see what else we got here. I had an email that I just closed. Oh, here we go. It's from Ken. Ken says, prior to Confederation, Nova Scotia had a very prosperous economy and many profitable businesses, partly due to the reciprocity treaty with the United States of America. After Confederation, many Nova Scotia businesses could not compete with Ontario and Quebec and either failed or relocated to Upper Canada. This resulted in the interprovincial protectionism among the provincial provinces. Nova Scotia has always been one of the provinces who was against interprovincial trade because of the above. That comes from Ken. Interesting. And let's see. This email, I'm just going through. Anyway, a number of emails, by the way, from people who were upset with what Jim's comments were regarding what Tony had to say. So there's a little bit of a back and forth there. So hopefully Tony can call the show, and maybe Jim can call the show again tomorrow and give Tony an opportunity to defend himself. Most of the emails, if not every email, supported Tony and suggested that Jim was a little harsh, I guess. I'm being kind in his comments about what Tony had to say. But anyway, I won't get in between the two of them. I'll let them fight it out themselves. Perhaps tomorrow they will do so. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass of the control boards, doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow, 10 o'clock. See you then.